Hello and welcome to another episode of Combat Analysis of Chivalry Medieval Warfare, where we take a look at hostile engagements, analyse them and talk about ways to improve our playstyle. My name is Marcus and I'm your host this evening. For this special occasion I'm bringing an analysis of two games, one at Cove and one at Dark Forest, but this time on a 32 player server. Generally I prefer to go for a slightly lower player count, but this is what was available to me at the time. I pretty much jumped straight into the action in this game, so without further ado, please sit back, relax and have a look at my first engagement. This fight starts off nicely with me going for an alternative slash so as to not get blocked by the trees. And I managed to clip the vanguard at the end of my attack. My assumption is that he thought I would be out of reach and therefore didn't bother to parry. I follow up with a stab, but it is pretty clear that I'm going to end up in a hit trade with a knight if I follow through, and therefore I do a feint to parry. This knight is a decent player, so in order to get through his parry effectively, I do a feint on my next coming slash. But just like before, I'm forced to feint to parry to avoid getting hit by the other opponent. Luckily this guy chooses not to parry yet again. And here I do another feint, but this time for a different purpose. It is not like before where I used it in order to force out an early parry, but rather I feel like I'm too far away from my opponents and will miss if I follow through with my overhead. So I cancel my attack and follow up with a stab. You'll notice this guy starts an attack at roughly the same time as me, and generally in this situation I recommend going for a feint to parry to avoid a hit trade. This time however it is not necessary, and the reason for this is that he is low on HP. I do not need to flinch him in order to avoid getting hit. All I need to make sure is that my attack connects sooner than his does. You'll notice here that he definitely gets into release phase before my stab connects, but the attack does not connect before he dies, and therefore it gets cancelled and I stay on full HP. After his death, I'm comfortable moving back from the fight to regenerate stamina. I have a lot of allies who can finish off the knight without my help. That turned out to be a really nice and clean fight for me. I didn't get both of the kills, but I definitely made them happen. Now this was probably the smoothest fight I had this game. Due to the high player count, a lot of the fights ended up getting messy, and thereby lost value in terms of analysis. I like not having to start off every single replay with saying that I made the mistake of taking on too many opponents. And because of this I put a lot of clips in the trash. But with that in mind, let's go ahead and watch the second fight of this game. Right off the bat, this is a huge team fight with about 6 opponents if my calculations are correct. I initiate on the knight with a shield, trying to cut him from behind. This is a fairly risky play as there is a vanguard with a pole hammer running up to me in the same vein. He actually ends up missing me somehow, but that is ultimately just his fault and not because I made a good play. Here I have to go a bit defensive and parry 2 attacks. Now I have 4 fairly healthy opponents right in front of me, so there's really no quick end to this fight. Because I'm using a longsword, I'm going to have to be very methodical in my approach. It can take me as much as 4 hits to kill a knight and 3 for a vanguard. That is an insane amount of attacks and will take a lot of time. If I had a maul or a poleaxe it would be a different story. Just 1 or 2 good openings and I could cut their numbers in half. This is one of the main issues with the longsword. It offers great handling, but no good way to cheese large amounts of opponents at the same time. So I run back a little to ensure that as few as possible of them are able to reach me. But here I see a potential opening on the knight in the golden helmet, as he just parried. I try to turn around and stab him, but I lose him in the smoke and just end up hitting the guy with a shield behind him. This is problematic as I inflict no damage on my opponent and get my combo broken. My vision is really impaired by the smoke surrounding us, so I actually decide to ignore all the incoming attacks and try to run back instead. This clearly doesn't work out and I tank 2 hits from different opponents. Now here a funny thing happens. While I was playing, I was confused by this turn of events. I just parried his attack, followed up immediately with a stab. How on earth did he manage to hit me after? He should have been in recovery, right? Well, what actually happened, if we look again, is that I didn't parry the Messer Knight at all. The clinging feedback here is actually just from parrying the longsword on the left, and not the Messer. The Messer missed, and where I thought he would be in recovery, he just continued his combo instead. So my stab just turns into a filthy trade, and I wouldn't be surprised at all if he thought I was playing like an idiot here. But in my defense, I still think it's quite hard to see that the Messer doesn't connect, and the clinging of the longswords also syncs up nicely. But from here and onward, I don't really get any other interesting engagements, and therefore I'm going to skip ahead to a fight that took place during the second objective. Like I mentioned, many fights got messy and this was no exception. I do some circling first, but don't actually bait out anything. And here I make a pretty big mistake. The problem is that I'm not using the length of my weapon to my advantage. I run way too close to my opponents before I wind up, and this results in a nasty hit trade with a warhammer. What's even stupider is that I actually try to feint the first attack and hit him with a follow-up. All this is just way too late, and I lose an unnecessary amount of health and stamina as a result. What I should have done is start my attack earlier, even as early as here, regardless if I'm planning to feint or not. If I do that, I'll be in release phase when I get close to the knights, and I can flinch them safely if they start their own attacks. You may notice that I try to do a feint to parry in response to the knight's overhead, but it's simply not fast enough. This is mostly due to the fact that I cancel my first attack and wind up again, hoping to bypass their parry this way. If I had managed to feint a parry on the first attack, it might have been a different story. Lucky for me, I managed to parry the follow-up stab. And with the help of my allied man-at-arms, this knight ultimately ends up dying. But now I am so low on health that I will die if I make just one more mistake. Against this knight I finally do something competent again. By circling around and dodging his attack, I manage to hit him in recovery. Then I do a follow-up feint, and I finish him with another stab. Shortly after this I end up dying, but that was hardly interesting to watch, so let's skip ahead yet again. Here I want to make sure to hit the knight from the opposite direction of the vanguard, so as to not allow him to parry both of us. You could make a case for not feeding him a parry here at all, as this does result in a riposte that kills off my allied vanguard. Since the knight is actually still facing my direction, he's quite likely to parry me after all. In competitive play it would make more sense to either miss on purpose here or feint, so as to not allow the knight any free parries. I just don't think it's as important in public team objective, as many opponents won't make effective use of parries anyway, and you'll be better off just pumping out a lot of attacks. But it's definitely something you can keep in mind if you're ganging up on a competitive player. Meaning that you have allies with you. That is a key component for this tactic. Because of the way parries work, that you need to parry successfully in order to keep parrying multiple attacks in quick succession, it can be advantageous to miss on purpose. Bait out a parry from your opponent, who then is left completely open for your allies to destroy. But back to the video. Here I see the vanguard approaching, and the last thing I want to do here is to get hit by his charge. So I back off just a little. As I turn around I notice he stopped running, and therefore can't charge anymore. I try to bait out an attack from him again, but he's quite passive. Now here I kinda want to help Silo if I can, so I start with a feint and follow up with a stab. This guy seems oblivious to everything I do and ends up taking it in the back. But then he parries my follow-up overhead, and I do an attack to parry in response to the 200 Vanguard. Sadly, I failed to see the Messer riposte coming. At first glance you may think he's playing a bit foul here by trading when I do another feint, but I should have actually expected this as he is close to burnout and doesn't want to parry any more attacks. For this reason, it makes sense for him to start another attack, even though it is my turn. He is simply running out of options at this point. What I should have done differently here is to do a quick attack right after getting hit by his riposte, as soon as I saw he wasn't comboing. Going for a feint here is actually pointless, as there is a high chance that he will go for a trade anyway. After this, I finally make the right move, as he yet again doesn't combo. I do a simple stab and he has two options. Either I get hit and die, or do a feint to parry. He chooses the latter and gets knocked into burnout. But here I do another really stupid thing, by grading out a stab while he's knocked out, even though the Vanguard is clearly about to hit us. I obviously needed to parry here instead. As a result, I end up dying and kill neither of them. Coming up next is a fight close to the cistern. That was mildly humiliating. Here I'm trying to find a good angle on the Golden Knight. I wait for his attack to come out and aim for a hit and recovery, but it gets flinched quickly enough by Silo that he is out of recovery by the time I come in, and he ends up parrying me. I continue with a slash and try to target switch from the Golden Knight to the one with a hammer, but my attack is just a little bit too late, and I end up getting traded once again. I'm definitely misplaying a lot this game, that is safe to say. But despite all the fuck-ups, we managed to finish even this objective, and the next fight of interest takes place inside the cistern. I start off trying to do a reverse slash on him, but he goes for a kick, as is often the case with opponents who know you're prone to feints. We trade some blows and I do a normal stab, as I'm kind of expecting him to overread. However, he parries successfully and turns on my allied archer. Now here you could definitely argue that I should have hit the Vanguard in front of me, that would be easy and safe as it's not facing my way. But take note that the Knight is actually the most likely to harm my ally at this point, as he is in the same position as me but on the other side, where he can get a free hit on the archer who is facing away from him. So in order to help my teammates in the best way possible, I choose to go for the Knight yet again, and I make sure to hit him mid-combo. He's probably a bit surprised by my decision, as he does not get a feint to parry out in time. I feint my subsequent slash and he eventually falls for it, but the parry is very late. I start my stab fairly early, and I'm forced to do a considerable drag to bypass his parry. As you can see, I make contact at the very end of my release. He dies to a follow-up overhead, and I manage to parry the next opponent just after getting out of recovery. Important to keep in mind when fighting this guy is that he's caught on that I use feints, and since he's a decent player I can definitely expect some in return. so circling around at the start becomes even more important, as I can expect him to lose a fair amount of stamina trying to play aggressively with feints as soon as I get near him. He doesn't actually go for a feint, but I do at least bait out a stab. I initiate with another feinted slash, stab and overhead. He cancels this attack by kicking and starts an overhead himself. This one he drags excessively so that it actually doesn't make contact, and he continues with a stab which he feints. But, like the god I am, I manage to read it. After I parry his overhead, I do a quick stab riposte. Coupled with feints, these can make for a very effective playstyle, as one element requires a lot of patience to deal with and the other an instant response. I keep manipulating the rhythm by dragging my next overhead, and after that go for a final feint and finish him off with a stab. Since that side is now clear of Agathians, I'm going to make my way to objective A instead. Okay, so let's have a look at that again. We're starting off with some casual back and forth with the archer. And right here I spot two vanguards running up the ramp towards me, and this is a situation I do not want to get caught up in. Therefore I do a leap towards the other ramp and run down that way. I do cross paths with a knight here instead, but it's still less trouble than staying and having them all collapse at me. I try to keep my combo afloat by target switching to the knight on my left, but yet again I end up trading. And keep in mind that this is the third time this game I end up doing a shitty trade with this particular player. To make matters worse, I tank a hit from the Messer Knight as I'm unable to combo feint to parry, and I'm ultimately finished off by follow-up hammer stab. Again, I'm just too greedy on my trades. I needed to combo feint to parry the hammer initially and turn back around to parry the Messer afterwards. It will require a lot of stamina, but it's better than dying with 50% of the pull left. Now I think that's enough footage of me failing at things, so let us go ahead and watch a sequence in which I come out on top. Even before I make it round the pillar, I know that the knight has caught wind of me and will be ready to react to my attacks. So instead of going straight for an attack, I make sure to dodge one of his first. He does a combo feint to parry and then another panic parry right after. Normally after parrying me, it would be his turn to attack, but since he parried again, the chance goes away. I do yet another stab and he parries this as well, but ends up losing tons of stamina after the whole exchange. I make a small mistake by starting another stab here. There's just no reason to when I see the vanguard charging at me. I make another bigger mistake by not parrying his follow-up attack. But here it's important to note that he does not combo. Therefore I can safely wind up and flinch him in the event that he starts attacking again. I follow up this stab with a dragged overhead, which also bypasses his parry and puts his HP very low. After cancelling my next coming overhead and starting another stab, both of these vanguards make the mistake of trying to attack me. Both of them are in a range of my stab and one hit from dying. So even in the event that they leave wind up phase, I'm still gonna get clean kills, as long as I kill them before their attacks reach me. It is really not in their best interest to go for trades here. Here I do a feint to bypass the knight's parry, and it is successful, but I decide to target switch and hit the knight behind him instead, as he is already swinging at me. Killing him is therefore more important than hitting the knight who is in recovery. This would have turned into another nasty trade had he not been this low on HP. But since he was also one hit from dying, my stab cancelled his attack even though it was in release. This knight tries for another overhead while I'm winding up my last attack. I'm not sure if he would have flinched me had he actually landed the hit, but I'm pretty confident I would have at least survived. Either way, he ends up missing and I do not, so he dies and the fight is concluded. A safer play on his part would have been to wait for my follow-up overhead and parry that before doing anything else in my opinion. Since he was also one hit from dying, it's not recommended to go for a trade. And that is the last fight of interest in the cistern. So now we're going to have a look at a fight on the last objective, by door number C. I start off quite clumsily by doing an alternative slash feint that I turn into a stab. The main issue here is that I start the first attack too early, and that it is seemingly going to miss. He wants to take advantage of this and goes for a slash that if timed right will hit me in recovery. Which is nicely done by him. It is important to be close enough to actually be able to hit your target when you feint. If you start the feinted attack too early when you're out of reach, your opponent will simply try to hit you in recovery and you will both end up clashing together as I do here. But at this point he is clearly one hit from dying, and yet again trading is really not going to be in his favour. Since he is in the most severe condition, I feel comfortable keeping the pressure up and going for an attack right away. Seemingly he chooses to go for a feint here to bypass my parry, but by the time he cancels the first attack my sword's already pierced him and he's out of the fight. His feint would have only worked against a player who doesn't have a grasp of initiative and chooses to go on the defensive in this situation. Now here I do a combo feint to parry in response to the slash, but he dies just as the blade is about to connect and this saves me a bit of stamina. I bypass his parry with a feint, stab him, but then I follow up with an extended drag which ends up missing altogether. But he still parries in response and I can continue my combo. After parrying my overhead, he goes for a feint. I don't have any trouble reading this, and as soon as I've parried his attack, I go for a normal stab. I'm fairly confident that he's going to overread this while anticipating another feint, and this is what ends up happening. The next vanguard is coming at me. He attacks way too early and I go in after with a stab. After he parries, I backpedal again, hoping to dodge yet another attack. He does not combo and takes damage while in recovery. On my following overhead I need to target switch as I have more incoming enemies. If I remember correctly, I initially meant this overhead for the knight on the left, realized he would be too far away, turned back towards the vanguard, noticed the second knight approaching, and turned even more to ultimately hit him instead. The good thing with target switching like this is you can keep several opponents under control, even if you only hit one of them, because the other guys will parry in anticipation of your attack. This is what the vanguard in the middle ends up doing. I never actually hit him with the overhead, but he parries anyway just in case, which means that he can't attack again until later. In these kind of situations, it's usually good to keep the combo going as much as possible. So I follow up with a slash that ends up hitting two of my opponents and killing one of them. My next overhead after that ends up hitting the golden helmet knight, but it connects so late in release that he ends up trading with me. I then parry another attack from knight number 2. The golden knight misses his reverse and then panic parries, which gives me another opportunity to hit him. Sadly I'm too far away and end up missing my stab. I tried to do a reverse slash here and hopefully hit both of them, but the open face helmet knight has enough time to wind up and ultimately stabs me to death. There is one thing I wish I would have done differently here, and that is to jump over the rock in front of me after killing the vanguard. Instead of following through with the overhead, I could have quickly cancelled it, jumped forward and turned around mid-air, and hopefully seen the knight's attacks in time to parry them. But these fights are always stressful and it could have gone much worse than it did, so overall I feel okay about it. And with that fight concluded, I've actually shown everything I wanted to in this particular game. We took down the entire door shortly after and finished off the peasant with an archer brigade behind the wall. Now let's move on and take a look at the game played on Cove instead. This game was played on the same session, directly after Dark Forest. I joined the Mason Order as per usual and made my way down to the cannons. Make sure to dodge vanguard charges whenever possible. It saves a lot of stamina and gives you a good angle to get a free hit on them early on. This guy completely disregards my follow-up overhead and dies. The vanguard who is now in front of me is a lot more skilled than the previous, so I have to be mindful. He does a feint to parry when I attack him mid-combo, and he follows up nicely with an overhead riposte, which I failed to see coming. But right here I think it's very important that we do not lose our concept of initiative. I don't know about you guys, but when I look at this vanguard, his entire body language just screams that he thinks he's got the upper hand, that he has me in a tight grip, and most importantly that he's about to start another attack. This is all great for me because I know very well that despite taking a fair bit of damage from their riposte, it is after all my turn to make a move. So if I go for an attack here and he does too, he will either have to feint to parry or get flinched and take damage. Now he actually does feint here, hoping to bypass my parry, but even if he didn't, I still would have flinched him. All the better for me, since it means he loses stamina in addition to HP. I follow up with an overhead which I now feint. He falls for it and I hit him once more. I definitely should have done an overhead here instead. I don't quite remember the damage numbers, but I have a feeling he might have died from it if I did that instead. I do ultimately make a mistake here, which results in my death, by trying to keep my combo alive and attacking Liana. I clearly needed to feint to parry here instead, but at least Silo finishes off the other vanguard at the same time, so my efforts definitely weren't in vain. Now let's skip ahead again to a fairly large team fight on the second stage of the map. Okay, right here I really wish I would strafe out to the left. End up going for a normal slash on Liana, and as a result I quite naturally fall into a position in between her and her teammates. This is something I really want to avoid if I can. You can see that after my first slash I'm completely facing the wrong direction, looking at my allies, when in reality I need to focus on what my opponents are doing. This could easily be fixed by me simply strafing a bit to the left of Liana and going for an alternative overhead instead. I would keep all my opponents inside of my field of view this way. The positioning doesn't actually become a problem for me in this fight, but it was a stupid move either way. The vanguard goes for a stab on me. I lean back and try to dodge it without having to parry, and I follow up with a slash after. But I end up missing since his weapon is a lot longer than mine and I can't get close enough during his attack to hit him with mine afterwards. This forces me into a combo feint to parry when the knight comes in for another strike. Here I want to back off a little as the rest of my allies are busy fighting the second knight on the right. and I do not have enough stam to take on these two guys alone. I see them moving up to get ready and attack Salo from behind, so I move into a position where I can counter-initiate in the event that they swing at him. Mostly I was just hoping to deter them, and that worked out fairly well. When Silo goes in for another attack, I want to be ready to follow up. But here I misjudged the distance between us and end up taking damage, as I tried to stay out of the range of the Zweihunter. This time it's the knight who swings. I dodge again and go in for a strike mid-combo. He responds with a combo feint to parry, I think. It could be an attack to parry, but I think it's a combo. And at this point I'm starting to feel like I'm in a pretty good position again, as my stamina pool is quite high and the others are sure to be depleted. But for some reason I completely mess up here and disregard parrying once again, even though I'm clearly in range. I ended up dealing with most of their attacks in this way this fight. Generally it's a very good idea to dodge attacks instead of parrying, as it takes me a lot of successful hits to kill any one of them, and I need to limit my stamina usage to make sure I last in the long run. But obviously I can't mess up like I did several times in this fight, and I would definitely argue that this was my biggest flaw. Here I start my first attack too early. Comboing afterwards is good because it ensures that she doesn't hit me in recovery, in the event that she turns around. But what I should have done is cancel the second attack, as it was going to miss anyway. Here I end up swinging and going into recovery, so if she had paid more attention, she could have turned around and hit me while I was open after the second slash. She actually allows me to start another stab after, so I'm getting quite a lot of space to do whatever I feel like. Once it is her turn to attack, it's important that I back off a little, as it makes it easier for me to read feints and drags. Important to keep in mind here is that I don't want to get back far enough that I allow her another attack afterwards. She is using a brandy, which means that she can never attack twice in a row if I play my cards correctly. The sweet spot is somewhere in the middle, where I can parry safely and still have time to run in for a strike afterwards. Now when I finally move into stab and follow up with a feint, she decides to go for a dirty trade and flinches me mid-combo. Normally after getting flinched like this, I would recommend winding up again, as she is unable to combo and I now have the initiative again. The reason I don't do this is because I accidentally parry after taking damage from her and I end up in recovery. So I have to allow her another attack before I continue mine. This time she is the one going for a feint, but I managed to read it and follow up my successful parry with a stab riposte that finishes her off. Here I make one singular but very crucial mistake. My initiation on the Golden Knight is fine, but right after feinting him, I needed to direct my follow-up stab toward the Mole Knight instead. I tried to hit both of them with my stab and end up hitting the Mole Knight so late in my release that he has plenty of time to leave wind up. Basically I have to flinch the knight in order to make this work. Since this weapon does an incredible amount of damage, I never want to end up trading hits with him. Another thing that could have been even safer is to simply wait after feinting the Golden Knight and parrying the Mole safely. My play is simply way too greedy here and I end up dying to a final poke from a Vanguard ally. Now I want to end this episode with a pretty long fight close to the Agathian spawn. Right here, I'm trying to find a good angle on my opponents. And there is no super obvious target. That is until the Golden Knight jumps into the picture. He's at a very convenient distance from me, swinging at one of my allies, which gives me a good opportunity to counter-initiate. However, as I'm winding up my slash for the knight, I spot Liana on the ledge above. I realize she's probably thinking I'm still going on the knight, and I try to use this to my advantage. As I'm swinging, I turn ever so slightly to the left, to make sure I manage to hit her instead. Now unfortunately for me, my sword also hits the wall here, which throws off my combo. You can see here that she's doing some motion with her brandy. I'm not sure if it's a micro feint or whatever, but at the time I was playing I did not notice it. I just felt like she stood there waiting for a long time, and I eventually had enough and wound up again. This time I go for a feint, which she falls for. Right here you can see both of these vanguards line up very nicely to get hit by my stab. But to really make sure I hit Liana, I direct my stab to the right as she moves in that direction. And I ultimately miss the vanguard behind her. Since I don't manage to flinch the other vanguard, I'm forced to quickly combo feint to parry. An attack to parry would have also worked here and saved me a bit of stamina, but I don't usually incorporate them into my playstyle. After that whole exchange, Liana ends up dying to an archer of ours, and I can start thinking about my next opponent. In this frame you can see there's a lot of action going on with the knights, and it would normally be a good time for me to intervene. However, one thing has me hesitant, and that is this vanguard right here. You can see by the way he moves, strafing to the left, that he's trying to get around and end up right behind me, in the event that I attack one of his allies on the right. So instead of going in, I circle around and wait for things to unravel. This knight eventually engages me, and after parrying his stab I try for a reverse slash. I'm not sure I turned enough before starting the slash, but either way he kicks me and my attack gets cancelled. He follows up with an accelerated overhead that he turns into a drag quite nicely. As I go in for my stab, the archer moves in the way and I'm forced to turn out to the right again and cancel my combo. At this point I can abuse the distance I've built up between me and the knight, and avoid any further parries by staying out of range while he's in release. He's one hit from dying, and all I need is a good angle to finish him off. That opportunity presents itself as he turns at the end of the release, completely facing the other direction. I wind up a stab, but he ends up dying to the archer before my blade reaches him. This was a pretty standard game overall. I definitely screwed up quite a bit here and there, but remember guys, fuck-ups are just opportunities to learn. Again, I do find 32 player servers to be a bit too crowded for my taste, and hopefully I can find some 24Ps in the future. And in case you're wondering, yes, we actually managed to win this game as well. With about 20 seconds to go, I managed to burn the last bookcase in the library and claim the title. That may have actually been the smoothest play I made this game, so I suppose I should leave it in here. I would like to thank Intox and Svaros for helping me with a demonstration in this episode. Their contribution, although not too big in size, was very valuable to me. And thank you for watching this episode of Combat Analysis. I hope you enjoyed and hopefully even learned something. Don't forget to subscribe if you'd like to see more of these. If not, maybe we'll just meet on the battlefield instead. That is where the real magic happens after all. Alright, Burkus out.